Next day, Lucas and the team left for the East Battle Administration area first thing in the morning. When Terry and Kevin found out they were gone, they hurriedly led their teams to try and catch up with Lucas. They knew by now that the success of the mission would depend a lot on Lucas. It would be foolish of them not to try and work together with him. On the airplane, Riley began to brief the team on the plan. Lin Fan was from the slums in the East Battle Administration area. His last known residence was somewhere deep inside the slum area. The slum areas were chaotic and filled with different gang factions. These gangs were involved in trafficking, drugs, assassinations, kidnapping, and every undesirable vice or crime you can think of. Even the security forces of the East Battle Administration area wouldn't dare venture deep inside the slum areas. Revenge from the gangs would mean that their families would be murdered and chopped into pieces, and hung at the door, for all to witness. We will go in, stay close, and try to find the information from Lin Fan's residence as quickly as possible, Riley said, and the other team members nodded. As the airplane descended, Lucas looked out of the window. He could see a huge swath of rice fields, and farther away was an even larger area made up of closely built wooden huts. And occasionally, he could see open areas with lavish bungalows that looked out of place among the sparse and dilapidated wooden huts. Lucas figured that it must have been the houses of the gang leaders ruling the slum areas that Riley mentioned earlier. After they got down from the airplane, they were immediately hit by the hot and humid air. A vast difference from what they were used to in the South Battle Administration area. The airbase looked run down. The soldiers sat in the checkpoints waving documents left and right in front of their faces to cool themselves. All they had other than that were wonky fans in the ceiling that gave out squeaking sounds when the blades rotated, barely able to cool them down. Next! Move it, we don't have the whole day. The heat made the soldiers impatient, and they shouted at Lucas and the others to hurry up. Lucas passed his ID to the soldier manning the checkpoint, and the soldier had to do a double take. His access granted by the leader made the soldier wary. Was Lucas a high-ranking official sent from the Center Battle Administration area? Many thoughts went through the soldier's mind, and he quickly turned his impatient expression into a smile. Here you go. He passed Lucas's ID back to him and gave Lucas a huge smile. Then, I'll be waiting for my teammates over there. Lucas nodded and said, reminding the soldier that Riley and the others were together with him. Lucas certainly didn't mind the perks of being associated with the leader and wasn't shy about using it. The soldier got his hint, and he nodded. He spoke into a mic receiver and said something. Riley and the others then went through the checkpoint smoothly after Lucas. After they got out of the checkpoint, Harrianto proceeded to one of the car rental companies next to the airbase. I miss having access to all the resources on a mission with Sherry. Rex shook his head and said when he saw Harrianto driving a worn-down blue van. Emma rolled her eyes and said, it's called blending in and not attracting unwanted attention. Yeah, whatever. I swear to God if it doesn't have aircon, You'll do what? Feel free to give up and forgo the rewards. Rex kept quiet when he thought about the reward of $5 million. Riley got into the front of the van while the others got in the back. The aircon hummed as Harrianto turned it to the coolest setting. Everyone gave out a huge sigh of relief. Finally, there was some respite from the heat and humidity. Along the way, whenever the van stopped in traffic, kids would come up to the van trying to peddle whatever they could. Cigarettes, flowers, and even fake jewelry. And when they couldn't get anything from Lucas and the others, they cursed at them, showing them unruly gestures as the van drove away. Most likely they are working under the gangs, Lucas said. His experience when he was expelled from school made him aware of how kids were being exploited and preyed upon when they had no other options. But it wasn't as prevalent and wasn't as numerous compared to what he had just witnessed. After an hour of travel, they finally arrived at the designated hotel. The so-called hotel was located at the fringe of the slums and was just a larger and better furnished wooden hut. Staff running the hotel were locals working as agents for the Center Battle Administration area. Welcome. I'm Hazel. Let me know if you need anything during your stay. The woman at the counter, Hazel, greeted Lucas and the others when she saw them. Her eyes beamed with happiness when she saw Lucas. The other staff in the hotel also stopped what they were doing and took a glance at him. They couldn't believe it when they saw Lucas. How is it possible for a young man like him to defeat an apex demonic beast? They thought. Her cheeks flushed and her heart thumped when she took a closer look at Lucas. Lucas was not only young but also good-looking. "And the keys to our room," Riley said, reminding Hazel that there was work to be done. "Oops, silly me." Hazel shook her head and took some keys from the counter. She handed the keys to Riley and said, "Always keep the key with you. There will be a penalty if you lose it." The keys had tracking devices on them, helping them to locate and provide support to Lucas and the others when required. Riley nodded and they headed up to the second floor of the hotel. The floor made of wooden planks creaked when they took a step. Rex frowned and sighed when he opened the door of his room. It only had a ceiling fan creaking along, and a bed. Other than that, there wasn't much. Lucas wasn't bothered. It somehow even reminded him of his small dark room back in the South Battle Administration area. After he settled in, it was already evening. Since it was already late, they had a quick dinner at the hotel's small dining room and went to bed. Lucas lay on the bed thinking about the leader and what the apex demonic beast had said. Creak. Suddenly, he heard a creaking sound in the corridor outside. Lucas got up from his bed and went to the side of the door. His hands flickered with flashes of lightning as he got ready for whoever was coming. Knock. The creaking stopped outside his door, and he heard a soft knock. "Who is it?" Lucas asked from behind the door. A familiar voice replied, "It's me, Hazel." Lucas frowned and asked, "What do you want at this hour?" He didn't expect it to be Hazel. "There are some complimentary drinks for you," Hazel said. Lucas opened the door slightly and saw Hazel, holding a bottle of wine and now dressed differently. He quickly closed the door and said, "Sorry, but I don't drink." Lucas didn't expect someone to be so direct. Maybe it was the norm in the East Battle Administration area, or it was due to the suffocating humid weather. Lucas thought. But he wasn't one to take advantage, and on top of that, he knew it was best for him to stay focused while on a mission. "Good night," Hazel replied with a tinge of disappointment. She quickly composed herself and left as if nothing had happened. Lucas was glad when he heard the creaking sound of the wooden plank getting further away. Next day, Lucas got up and met up with the team for breakfast early in the morning. They gathered in the dining room, sitting close together with elbows touching each other's. It made them gobble up the food as fast as they could. Being able to feel each other's breath wasn't pleasant. And while they were eating, Hazel briefed them on how to get into the slum area without any hiccups. "There is a gambling den operated by the Hong Men gang. Just say that you are going in to try your luck, and you were introduced to the place by Uncle Robin. Pay them some money and the gang members at the entrance will let you through without much fuss." Lucas and the others nodded and took note of what Hazel had said. Soon they were done with their breakfast, and they left the hotel for the day. While he was leaving, Hazel gave Lucas a smile, as if nothing had happened the night before. It didn't take long for the van to reach the entrance of the slum area. Harriento had to stop when the van got near, and a rock wall barrier rose from the ground. Someone with rock ability had stopped them. A few men then came out from the wooden huts on the side of the road. They tapped on the windows, gesturing for Harriento to wind them down. Harriento obliged and they asked, "Who are you? And where are you going?" "We are going to the gambling den. Uncle Robin introduced us to it," he replied as Hazel had taught them. "Uncle Robin, eh? Then, you should know what to do next," one of the men with curly hair said and lit a cigarette. Harriento nodded and quickly took out a stash of cash, handing it over to the man with curly hair. The man with curly hair took a puff of his cigarette and started counting the cash. After he was satisfied with the amount, the rock barrier went back down into the ground, and he waved at Harriento. Harriento changed gear and stepped on the pedal. The van moved into the slum area's bumping as it went past bumps on the mud road. Lucas glanced at the gang members from the window at the back of the van. He noticed one of them picking up a radio and speaking into it, most likely informing others of their arrival. These gangs were certainly more organized than he had thought. Haryanto drove the van slowly through the narrow and winding roads of the slum areas. Initially, kids would dart out of nowhere and bang on the side of the van, trying to scare whoever was inside. But after that, the kids would suddenly fall onto the ground before they could reach the van. Lucas had used his shadow wielder ability to trip them off their feet. With the obstacles cleared by Lucas, the later journey was much smoother, and they finally arrived near Lin Fan's residence. Margaret, stay in the van with Rex and Emma. Lucas and Haryanto move into the house with me to see if there are any clues left behind. Riley gave out his instructions and they nodded. When Lucas got out of the van and saw Lin Fan's residence, he was surprised. It was an ordinary wooden hut, looking the same as the other wooden huts that were beside it. That's odd. As an awakened, he should have more than enough to move out of this place. Lucas frowned and said. It made no sense to him. Riley and Haryanto also agreed with his assessment. But that was not the reason they were here. Lucas, Riley and Haryanto walked towards the wooden hut. Riley and Haryanto stood beside Lucas while he walked towards the door. Click. He turned the doorknob and strangely enough, it unlocked without any effort. Either Lin Fan didn't lock the door, or someone had broken into the wooden hut. Lucas glanced at Riley and Haryanto, and they nodded. Flashes of lightning appeared in Riley's hands while Haryanto got ready to unleash a plasma pulse at any moment. Creak. Lucas pushed the door and he entered the hut. The hut was stuffy and dusty. A layer of dust had settled on the furniture and floor of the wooden hut. Lucas went on high alert when he saw some of the dust on the floor was smudged away. Thud. Just as he was about to squat down to have a closer look, he heard a thud at the back of the wooden hut. Lucas activated his shadow wielder ability, and his shadow broke off from his body. It slipped past the walls and furniture, blocking its way easily. Arg! A kid's voice shouted after the kid fell to the ground. Lucas frowned and went to the back of the wooden hut with Riley and Haryanto following closely behind. Who are you? The kid, who was struggling to break free from Lucas's shadow, pointed at him and said, We are friends of Lin Fan. Looking for him. Lucas gave him a smile and said. He stretched out his hand, offering to help the kid get up. The kid glanced at Lucas and hesitated. Lucas saw that the kid was thin and frail. The kid trembled and tried to slowly step back away from Lucas. Relax. We are not going to harm you. Lucas took out an energy bar and placed it on the table next to him. The kid glanced over at the energy bar, held onto the hem of his cloth tightly, and had an internal struggle as he glanced back and forth between the energy bar and Lucas. Seeing this, Lucas took out another energy bar and unwrapped it. Actually, I'm pretty hungry too. Growl. When the kid saw Lucas munching on the energy bar, his stomach growled involuntarily. Finally, the kid gave in and grabbed the energy bar. He glanced at Lucas and said, Brother Lin Fan is away, that's all I can say. Brother Lin Fan? So, you are his younger brother? Lucas asked. No, we are all orphans growing up here, and he has helped many of us to survive here in the slum. The kid replied. Lucas nodded his head silently. He figured Lin Fan must have spent much of his money on the kids in the slums, and maybe that's why he was still living in such a place. Lin Fan is a kind man indeed. Was there anyone else who had visited him recently? We have a lucrative mission waiting for Lin Fan, and if those people can help us find Lin Fan, it'll be great. The kid's eyes opened wide when he heard Lucas saying that there was a lucrative mission for Lin Fan. He would be more than happy if Lin Fan could earn a lot and improve his own living conditions. The kid quickly closed his eyes and tried to recall who had visited Lin Fan recently. Take your time, Lucas said, and he glanced at Haryanto. Haryanto nodded and stepped away quietly. He started to search for any computers or electronics Lin Fan might have in his house. To his disappointment, there weren't any that he could make use of to gather information. As Haryanto glanced at the table near the window, he saw some men walking over to the van. One of these men banged on the window of the driver's seat. The man with his head full of curly hair was one of the sentries they'd met earlier. Why are you here? The gambling den is far away. The man with curly hair asked. His buddies came forward and drew out their pistols. Rex wound down the window and said, "We got lost and some of us had to take a leak in one of the alleys." He gave them a plausible excuse. The man with the curly hair looked at the back of the van. When he saw that there were only Emma and Margaret sitting at the back of the van, he nodded his head. "Don't wander off too far. We are only in charge of this area. The other gangs aren't as friendly as us, that's for sure," the man with curly hair said and waved his hand, gesturing for the other men to leave with him. The other men kept their pistols and followed closely behind. As they got further away, Rex saw that they started to hasten their pace. "We've got to hurry," Rex spoke into his earbuds. Lucas frowned and tried to prompt the kid when he heard Rex in his earbuds. "Was there a place that Lin Fan went to frequently?" he asked. The kid scratched his head and tried to think hard. Finally, after a few moments of trying, he stopped his scratching and said, "Nowhere else other than the Gold Hill Cemetery. He would go there in the morning on the 5th of each month to visit his parents' grave." The kid lowered his head and said, "He never told me who his parents were, though." "Thanks. We will leave and try our luck there," Lucas said and handed more energy bars to the kid. That was the best he could do at that moment. Lucas then glanced over at Riley. He knew that they had to leave the place quickly before it affected the kid. Riley nodded. Together with Lucas and Harrianto, the three of them left the wooden hut swiftly. They got into the van and Harrianto took the driver's seat again. "Virum." Harrianto started the engine and began to step on the pedal. The van's engine puttered, blew out a cloud of dark smoke before the wheels started to turn. "You might want to go faster," Riley said when he saw cars coming towards where they were. "That's the fastest I can go." Harrianto floored the acceleration pedal, but the wonky old van only went a little faster. Honk! A car that was coming head-on with the van honked furiously, warning them to stop. One of the men in the car then stuck his body out of the car window and pointed his pistol at the van. But before he could open fire, he saw the wooden huts in the surrounding area getting lower in his vision. To his astonishment, the car had floated into the air. Lucas used his gravity ability to make the car 6 times lighter than normal. Then, he used his shadow to hurl the car into the air. The van drove past the floating car on the ground and the man, sticking out of the car window, tried to point his pistol down at the van. Bang! He missed as the van got further away. His gunshot, however, alerted the other cars and gang members. When they looked up into the sky, they couldn't believe it when they saw the car floating in the air. Their mouths opened wide. It wasn't the end of it as the car then slammed down towards the ground in free fall a few moments later. The effect from Lucas's gravity ability had worn off. Crash. The other gang members heard a loud crash as the car crashed onto the ground. After which, they could hear the loud cries of pain from the gang members inside the car. "Get the Awakened to help!" The man with curly hair shouted at one of the men beside him. The man quickly took out his phone and made a call. "Who are they?" "Someone from the Mountain Snake Gang," the man with curly hair mumbled to himself. If he let Lucas and the others get away, he would have to face the gang leader, Lee Hee-song, for his mistake. And he knew what would happen when Lee Hee-song wasn't pleased. "Watch out!" Riley shouted when he saw 2 cars coming at the van from the sides. Screech. The tires of the 2 cars coming from the sides screeched and gave out dark smoke as the tires ground against the ground. "What are you doing?" The gang member inside the car shouted at the driver. "I didn't do nothing." The driver stepped onto the acceleration pedal to no avail. They could do nothing but watch the van move away from them. Lucas had used his shadow and made it break off from him and split into 2. The shadows having the same strength as him were more than enough to stop the cars in their tracks. "No, stop!" When the shadows went away and there was nothing stopping the 2 cars, they sped ahead towards each other. The sudden acceleration was too fast for the drivers to react. When the 2 cars slammed into each other, they gave out a loud crashing sound. Steel and metal of the cars twisted as the impact was too powerful. The man with curly hair who was chasing behind could only curse when he saw the scene. All he could hope for was for the awakened in the gang to be able to stop them. As the van got closer to the entrance of the slum, Lucas saw that some of the men had set up a barrier with many cars lined up one after another. Some men in armor who appeared to be awakened arrived at the entrance and stood behind the barrier. They weren't too pleased to be suddenly activated. "Is that all?" One of them with a mouthful of gold teeth said and spat on the ground when he saw that they were activated for a van. "All of you better buck up and do your job after this." He shook his head and said to the gang members who were standing behind him. The gang members lowered their heads and nodded. Gold Teeth then stepped forward and leaped onto the top of the cars in front of him. "Come to Daddy." Gold Teeth grinned and raised his hand when the van got closer. His hands were engulfed in a golden glow and large golden cubes appeared in the air above him. Lucas saw what Gold Teeth was doing and said, "Let me handle it. Get ready to drive through at any moment." Screech. The van stopped and Gold Teeth gave out a burst of laughter. "Come out and surrender. Tell me who you are working for, and I might let you off." Lucas got out from the back of the van. He walked to the side, turned around and faced Gold Teeth with his hands raised. Gold Teeth grinned and didn't think much of it when he saw how young Lucas was. Lucas then gave Gold Teeth a smile and said, "I work for the leader." "The leader? Then I must be the leader's father," Gold Teeth said and burst out laughing again. The gang members also couldn't believe what Lucas had said, and they joined in the laughter with Gold Teeth. Lucas shrugged and gave out a sigh. Flickers of lightning appeared in his hands the next moment. Gold Teeth frowned when he saw the lightning, and awakened with lightning ability. No wonder he had the guts to come out alone, Gold Teeth thought. But Gold Teeth wasn't taken aback. He had dealt with his fair share of awakened with lightning ability over the years, and none were a match for him. Gold Teeth began to wave his hand at Lucas, not giving him time to accumulate his lightning strike. The golden cubes shot at Lucas with great velocity. Clang! A loud sound could be heard when the golden cubes hit the ground. But Lucas was nowhere to be seen. He had disappeared into thin air suddenly. Gold Teeth glanced around but couldn't see Lucas anywhere. "See where he went," he shouted at the other awakened and gang members. They panicked and they started to glance around anxiously, fearing that Lucas might appear in front of them the next moment and gut them in cold blood. "Come out, you coward!" Gold Teeth shouted as he pulled back his hands, making the golden cubes fly back to where he was. Lucas stood not far away observing everything that was going on. He had activated his Ether Realm ability and got near Gold Teeth from within his Ether Realm. As the clock counted down, he got ready for his next attack. "What the hell?" Gold Teeth shouted when he saw Lucas suddenly appear right in front of him. Lucas smiled and gave Gold Teeth a jab to his head. Boom! His fist was so fast that it turned into a shimmer. Gold Teeth's eyes couldn't even catch it. Bladder. The impact from Lucas's jab caused half of Gold Teeth's head to explode. Flesh, blood and white matter splattered all over the surroundings. The next moment, Gold Teeth's lifeless body dropped onto the top of the car, giving out a loud thud. The other awakened and gang members could feel the chills in their hearts when the warm blood of Gold Teeth splattered onto their faces. Gold Teeth was SSS level at expert level of mastery. How could he be defeated so easily? Unless the awakened began to step back. The gang members, however, started to run away from Lucas. Lucas glanced at the awakened and raised his right hand. His right hand was then engulfed in a golden glow. Gold cubes appeared in the air above Lucas. "That's the ability of Gold Teeth." The awakened stammered as they saw Lucas wielding the ability of Gold Teeth. This sight was too overwhelming for them. This man must be a devil, they thought. A thought went through their minds when they saw the gang members getting further away. They glanced at each other, nodded and started to run away from Lucas. Whatever money and resources they got from Lee Hee-song weren't enough for them to give up their lives. With all of them gone, Lucas waved his right hand down, hurling the golden cubes onto the cars. The golden cubes crashed onto the cars, making them flat. He had used the Crimson Pact ability to obtain Gold Teeth's ability. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 500. Current slaughter points 6,700/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. Lucas proceeded to clear the barriers to the side of the road. His strength was now so great that he lifted the cars easily like pieces of paper. After he was done, he got back into the van. Virum. The engine of the van roared as Haryanto stepped on the accelerations pedal. East Battle Administration Area. In the center of the city where the posh area was, Leroy stared at Ashen, but he kept quiet, knowing how much stronger Ashen was. He was very frustrated with the hot and humid weather. His clothes, drenched in sweat and sticking to his skin, felt unbearable. "Why are we here again?" he said frustratedly to Ashen. "Why?" Ashen frowned and looked at Leroy. At times, he wondered why the Dark Lord had chosen Leroy over the others. Leroy was always aloof from the mission they had at hand. All that Leroy cared about was the killing. "Yeah, why? We should be having our revenge against those bastards," Leroy said as he cracked his knuckles. "Because it's better for us to try and get to the first awakened or apex demonic beast here in the East Battle Administration Area, while they deal with the apex demonic beast in the West Battle Administration Area." Ashen reminded him of their mission. He pointed to a posh-looking building and said, "There it is. We will stay here and lie low for the time being. Lin Fan is supposed to meet us in the Golden Hill Cemetery on the 5th of the month, which is tomorrow." Ashen didn't want to risk contacting Lin Fan after what had happened in the West Battle Administration Area, so he stuck with the prearranged timing and location with Lin Fan. If Lin Fan showed up, that meant that he had succeeded. On the other hand, if he didn't, it would mean that Lin Fan had failed. And without the tissue and demonic beast core from the apex demonic beast in the West Battle Administration Area, they would have to try and kill the first awakened or apex demonic beast before Igor could make them stronger. After the defeat by Lucas and his teammates, Ashen had grown more wary. He preferred to get more powerful first before they met Lucas again. Leroy, however, didn't think as much. He stretched his body and let out a yawn. One night of doing nothing seemed boring to him, but he kept quiet as he tried to figure out some fun he could have while waiting. "Lin Fan was the one who thought that we would really help those kids if he got us what we want?" Leroy asked with a smirk. Ashen nodded his head. Leroy let out a burst of laughter and said, "I still remember his face when I pretended to care about the kids, giving out treats to them. Too bad he couldn't back out anymore when he found out who we really were. If not, it would certainly be a pleasure to kill all the kids." Enough. This time Ashen stopped Leroy instead of Risa. Listening to Leroy's banter finally got to him. Risa was standing behind them with his usual quiet demeanor. The three of them kept quiet, took out their counterfeit IDs, and walked over to the lobby counter to check in. Hazel paced around, looking out of the window on and off, anxiously checking every so often on her screen for the location of Lucas and the others. The other staff in the hotel shook their heads when they saw her doing so. "Relax, Lucas will be fine. The man can finish off an apex demonic beast on his own. You know what that means, right?" One of the staff placed her hand on Hazel's shoulder and said, "I guess you are right." Hazel let out a sigh. She also knew that, but she just couldn't stop herself. The staff then leaned closer and whispered, "So, did both of you?" Hazel nudged the staff with her elbow and said, "None of your business. He's not local, and I might have been too direct. You need help with that? I have some tricks from when I got my husband to say yes." The staff beside Hazel said with a wink. The others heard what Hazel and the staff were discussing, and they tried to gather around for more gossip. Virum. To their disappointment, Hazel stopped the conversation and walked towards the entrance when she heard the van's puttering engine. Lucas and the others got out of the van, unaware of what had transpired. They got into the hotel, and Hazel greeted them enthusiastically with a smile. "How was your day?" Hazel asked before they went to their rooms. "We did some sightseeing and had some fun, I guess." Riley shrugged and said, "Do you know where the Golden Hill Cemetery is?" "Golden Hill Cemetery? That's some distance away from here. It's where the veterans and those that perished under the demonic beast hordes are buried. Hold on. Hazel ran to the counter and took out a map. She used a pen and marked where the Golden Hill Cemetery was. After she passed the map to Riley, Lucas and the others came close and had a look at the location. The Golden Hill Cemetery was far away from anything else. There were no buildings or residential areas near it. It would take them at least 3 hours of traveling to reach it. Looks like a great place for some hanky-panky, Rex said. Or dealing with terrorists like the Shadow Lotus. Emma rolled her eyes and said, Thanks. Let's discuss this in Riley's room, Lucas said. He had heard some cars approaching the hotel with his exceptional hearing. The others nodded, and they proceeded to walk up the stairs to their room. Hazel glanced at Lucas while he walked further away. He seemed so determined for someone so young, she thought. Any rooms available? An old man's voice disrupted her thoughts, and Hazel turned to the entrance. There was an old man with 3 other men standing at the entrance. The old man was thin, with a walking stick in his hand. A single glance at the old man would give you chills from his small but menacing eyes. The 3 men standing beside him were just as menacing, with piercings and tattoos all over them. I'm sorry, but the rooms have been fully booked. You might want to check out. Hazel tried to get them to leave, but one of the men barged to the side of the lobby and said, What are these then? They look empty and unoccupied to me. Oh, these rooms are hot and stuffy. They might not be the best experience for guests. I don't recommend them. Hazel cooked up an excuse and tried to persuade them. They were, however, strangely persistent about staying in the hotel. The old man glanced at one of his subordinates, and the subordinate took out a stack of cash and slammed it on the counter. We want 4 rooms for the night. Let me get them ready. Hazel didn't want to jeopardize Lucas's mission, so she tried to accommodate their request. She thought to herself silently that she would keep them under constant surveillance. And if they tried anything funny, the old man narrowed his eyes at Hazel, tapping his hand on the walking stick as thoughts went through his mind. Hazel stood behind the check-in counter, processing the check-in for the 4 of them. Her colleagues, meanwhile, got the rooms ready. They tried to make the rooms as unwelcoming as possible, and they also checked that the surveillance devices were working properly. The old man with the 3 other men kept silent and got into the rooms after that. Surprisingly, they didn't make any noise after they got into the rooms. Hazel looked at the footage from the surveillance camera and saw that they just sat on their beds, doing nothing else. It was going to be a long night, she thought. Inside Riley's room, Lucas and the others gathered around, looking at the map. The area is huge for us to cover the whole area together. We might have to split up, Riley said. I can be at the center of it. Easier for me to reach anyone when something happens. Lucas pointed to the center of the Golden Hill Cemetery and said, Riley, Emma, Rex, Harrianto, and Margaret nodded their heads. Harrianto raised his hand and said, I can also make a drone to help with it, but my ability can only make it fly for 1 hour at a time. Great. We have to make use of whatever we can. Riley agreed to Harrianto's help. What Harrianto said also reminded Riley and the others of their abilities and how far behind they were compared to Lucas again. It seemed like they would have to buy up all the demonic beast cores they could with the $5 million reward they got. Riley sighed and said, If there are no other questions, have a good rest for tonight after dinner. We move out early in the morning at 4 before the sun rises. Lucas nodded and went back to his room. He took a shower, freshened up, and waited for dinner time. While doing so, he summoned Sheba out from his summon space. Sheba leaped excitedly when it saw Lucas. Creak. The wooden floor creaked with every jump made by Sheba. I know you are excited, buddy, but the floor might not hold, Lucas said, and Sheba stopped jumping around in excitement. Lucas patted its head and asked, Do you have any ideas about what the apex demonic beast said? Something about Elder? He was out of ideas on where to find the answer, and he thought he would give it a try asking Sheba. Sheba tilted its head and gave Lucas a blank look. Tried to recall. But Sheba realized that it couldn't remember anything before it was rescued by Lucas. Could only draw a blank. Sheba lowered its head and shook it. It's all right, buddy. I will figure it out somehow. Lucas patted its head again, trying to console it. I will get you a sumptuous meal later at dinner, he said, as he knew what would cheer Sheba up the most. Sheba grinned with its huge mouth and nodded its head. Finally, it was dinner time, and Lucas summoned Sheba back into his summon space. When Lucas came down to the ground floor, he noticed that the doors to the rooms at the side of the main lobby were all shut. Someone had moved in, he thought. Lucas confirmed it when he saw another car parked outside in the hotel's car park. He stood and tried to listen to what was going on inside the room but couldn't. All that he could hear was the breathing sound of the men inside. Lucas then proceeded to the dining room. There are new guests in the hotel. As dinner was served, he mentioned it to the other team members. Riley frowned when he heard Lucas. This hotel was supposed to be a safe house for them, with the staff working for Sherry. Don't worry, I will keep an eye on them. Hazel, with a plate in each hand, came into the dining room. Let us know if you need help, Riley replied. Lucas sat and thought otherwise. He had seen enough to have a hunch about what was going on, and he would rather not be the one waiting to strike. Lucas kept quiet and nodded his head. Hazel, who was unaware of what Lucas was thinking, stood straight and gave him a smile. She would try her best and ensure that Lucas's mission went smoothly, she thought silently to herself. Lucas and the others had their dinner quickly as the small dining room was stuffy. He returned to his room and waited for nightfall to come. Insects chirped as the air became cooler after the sun had set. Darkness took over, and the breeze that blew made the branches of the trees sway and make rustling noises. Lucas got up from his bed and listened to the surroundings. Amidst the insects and rustling noises was Hazel at the counter. There weren't any noises coming from the four men. Lucas opened his door slowly and used his gravity ability. He flew above the wooden floor, making no noise, and when he got to the staircase, he activated his Ether Realm ability. He disappeared from sight immediately at the very next moment. The old man inside his room finally stood up and walked over to his walking stick. He picked it up and tapped it on the ground. Whoosh! Something radiated out into the surroundings from the walking stick. Inside the old man's mind, a three-dimensional image of the hotel appeared. He could see everyone that was inside the hotel. First he saw Hazel at the check-in counter and the other staff busy preparing and cleaning. And on the second floor, he smirked when he saw Rex fast asleep. The others were also lying on their beds, fast asleep, deep in their dreams. However, his smirk disappeared when he saw Lucas missing from his bed. The old man tapped his walking stick on the ground again. This time, the three-dimensional imagery in his mind became much clearer. He scanned frantically for the whereabouts of Lucas. The old man was about to give up when he suddenly saw a man appearing out of nowhere right inside his room in his three-dimensional imagery. He opened his eyes, and to his horror, Lucas was standing right in front of him. Who sent you here? Lucas asked the old man with an intense stare. The old man ignored him, clenched the walking stick tightly, and swung the walking stick at Lucas. Thud! Lucas held up his arm and blocked the walking stick. To his surprise, the walking stick bent and wrapped around his forearm. The old man leaned back and tried with all his strength to pull the walking stick back. But he couldn't. Lucas didn't even move an inch. The old man quickly lifted his right leg and whipped it at Lucas's waist. Crack! Arg! The old man let out a grunt when his leg hit Lucas's waist. A loud cracking sound from his shin bone could be heard. Fear struck the old man. Lucas wasn't someone he could deal with alone. The old man tried to draw his leg back, but it was grabbed by Lucas's hand. Tell me who sent you here, Lucas asked again. This time he slowly clenched his hand, holding the old man's leg tighter. The pain caused the old man to twitch, and the old man let go of his walking stick. Whoosh! The walking stick unwound itself from Lucas's arm and shot at his eyes. Lucas turned his head slightly and the walking stick missed, hitting the wall behind. When the walking stick struck the wall, it gave out a pulse of white glow. That was the old man's actual intention, trying to get the walking stick onto any surface of the room. The whole room and the old man were then engulfed in the white glow. It looked exactly like the imagery that was inside the old man's mind. Lucas wasn't sure what the old man's ability could do, so he decided to end it quickly. He tried to yank the old man's leg towards him, but the old man's leg slipped out of his hand. Boom! Lucas pulled back his arm and punched at the old man's head. The burst of air from his fist shot at the old man. Whoosh! Miraculously, the air didn't do any damage, and it appeared to have slipped past the old man's head. Lucas thought for a moment and he decided to change strategy. The air started to turn chillingly cold and ice crystals appeared in the surroundings as the temperature went down drastically. It worked as the old man started to shiver and his movements became slower. The old man then raised his hand at the walking stick. Whoosh! The walking stick flew out of the wall and shot at Lucas from behind. Thud! However, it stopped in mid-air. What are you? The old man couldn't believe his eyes when he saw Lucas using his shadow wielder ability to stop his walking stick. Lucas was someone out of this world, the old man thought. The old man made a decision the next moment. Stop! Lee Hee-song from the Hong Men gang sent me. Let me go, I beg you. I've learned my lesson. Lucas tilted his head and said, You are begging because you don't have any choice, not because you really want to. After he said that, Lucas pointed his hand at the old man. Ice started to engulf the old man. After a few moments, the white glow engulfing the old man and room went away. Soon, the old man stood still like an ice sculpture. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points 7,300/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. Lucas wasted no time and used his Ether Realm ability. He got into his Ether Realm and went through the wall of the room to the next one, where the old man's subordinate was staying. The subordinate with tattoos on his arms and body suspected something when he heard some commotion next door and when he suddenly felt cold. He wanted to go and check it out but didn't do so. The old man was always successful in his missions. The tattooed man wouldn't want to invite a scolding from the old man for not trusting his ability. This time, however, the tattooed man was wrong. Lucas appeared out of nowhere suddenly, and before the tattooed man could react, the tattooed man was held in place where he was. Using his shadow, Lucas had held the tattooed man's arms and legs. You! The tattooed man gritted his teeth, trying to break free from Lucas's grasp. His face reddened from his exertion of force. Yet the result was the same. Lucas held the tattooed man with overwhelming strength. The tattooed man then started shaking his arms and body. Plop! The tattoos that were on the man's arms and body started dropping to the ground. A tattoo tiger lunged at Lucas. Boom! Lucas punched at the tattoo tiger, and it dissipated into thin air. Whoosh! A tattoo eagle swooped down at Lucas from the air. Lucas swung his arm at the tattoo eagle. The same thing happened to the tattoo eagle. It was gone within a moment when Lucas's arm swiped at it. Other tattoo beings on the ground lunged at him together. Lucas conjured icicles and shot at them. Most of them were hit by the icicles and they dissipated immediately. One of the tattoo beings dodged the icicles and latched onto Lucas's skin on his hand. It latched onto it, and it was as if Lucas had tattooed it onto his hand. The tattoo being, which was a soldier, started moving on Lucas's skin, like it was a canvas. Lucas tried to hit it with his other hand, but he only felt pain on his wrist. He was only able to slap his own wrist. The tattoo soldier continued to move upwards onto Lucas's forearm. He tried to stop it by grabbing it, but the tattoo soldier just slipped around to the other side of his forearm. It got to his upper arm. This time Lucas tried to stop it with his ice ability. He froze the skin on his upper arm, but the tattoo soldier continued to trudge along, moving onto his shoulder. Lucas knew he had to stop it fast as the tattoo soldier might be going for his artery on his neck. Lucas hovered his hands over his neck, getting ready for the tattoo soldier. He was right as a few moments later the tattoo soldier appeared on his neck. It drew out a knife and started to make a slicing motion. A wound appeared on Lucas's neck where the tattoo soldier was slicing. However, it couldn't inflict much damage as the wound healed fast enough for the wound to be closed the next moment. The tattoo soldier stopped and took out a grenade. But Lucas wasn't going to allow it to do so. He used his ice ability and froze his skin on his neck. He didn't stop there this time. Lucas dug into the frozen skin with his finger and with a sudden yank, he ripped the skin from his neck with the tattoo on it. He unleashed flickers of lightning onto the frozen skin, and it burned into ashes. The tattooed man looked on at what Lucas did and trembled. The wound on Lucas's neck was now healing itself. Bits of new skin grew and closed the wound. Lucas looked at the tattooed man with a stare that nearly gave the tattooed man a heart attack. He took a step forward towards the tattooed man and grabbed the tattooed man's neck. Arg! The tattooed man could only let out a whimper of a cry when Lucas tightened his grasp, slowly suffocating the tattooed man. Lucas didn't stop and his fingers dug into the tattooed man's neck. Blood oozed out from his fingers as he finally clenched his fingers into a fist. His hands had ripped through the tattooed man's neck. Lucas pulled out his fingers and a familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points 7,900/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. With his experience dealing with the tattooed man, Lucas decided to go back into the old man's room. He drew some blood from the old man and used his Crimson Pact ability. After he was done obtaining the old man's ability, he got into the room of one of the other remaining 2 men with his Ether Realm ability. When the man inside the room tried to unleash his ability with tattoos at Lucas, Lucas was ready for it. He tapped his finger onto the wall of the room, and the room was engulfed in a white glow. The man unleashed his tattoos at Lucas. This time, when the tattoos tried to latch onto Lucas's skin, they couldn't. They slipped back onto the ground the very moment they touched the white glow engulfing Lucas. The man knew he had no chance, and he tried to get away from Lucas. But Lucas took him out with a left hook at close distance. Bladder. He was too fast for the man to duck. The left hook landed on the man's head and the blood and white matter from the man's head splattered onto the wall. Lucas didn't waste any time and proceeded to deal with the last man. It was the same one-sided battle with the same outcome. And when he was done, a sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 1,200. Current slaughter points 9,100/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. Lucas looked at the system's information panel and he was pleased to see that he had enough to upgrade one of his new abilities. He thought about upgrading his Ether Realm and Crimson Pact ability. Information about the upgrades appeared in his mind. Improvements in Adept level of Mastery, SSS level Ether Realm. Within the realm, Host would be able to see where enemies are, no matter what abilities they are using to hide from Host. Ether Realm at Adept level of Mastery allows Host to stay within for 30 seconds. Improvements in Adept level of Mastery, SSS level Crimson Pact ability. Allows Host to unleash double the power of the ability Host obtained through the ability. The usage of the ability through the Crimson Pact would last for 5 minutes. Lucas pondered for a few moments as the upgrades for the abilities seemed to be very useful. The Ether Realm ability afforded him stealth, giving him an upper hand in surprising his enemies. As for the Crimson Pact, he could think of instances where he had abilities temporarily like those from Sherry or even the First Awakened. That would make him much more powerful temporarily for 5 minutes. These upgrades were something that no one could refuse. Lucas thought about the mission, and he couldn't wait to proceed with upgrading the 2 abilities. It would definitely be a game changer when dealing with Ashen. For him to be able to see where Ashen was when Ashen hid within his dimensional ability would be a great deal. And with his Crimson Pact ability, Lucas would be able to make use of Ashen's ability against Ashen himself. Having decided, Lucas thought yes silently. The next moment, the upgrade to his Ether Realm and Crimson Pact abilities started. A familiar sound erupted in his mind a few moments later. Ding! Congratulations, Host! SSS level Ether Realm upgraded to Adept level of Mastery. SSS-level Crimson Pact upgraded to Adept level of Mastery. Lucas felt a gust of energy coming into his body. He glanced at his watch and saw that it was only half an hour past midnight. The door of the room opened and Hazel's hand holding a pistol was trembling. When she saw what happened through her surveillance screen, she was in awe of Lucas's powers. She hesitated about whether she should try to help Lucas, but it was obvious to her very soon that Lucas didn't need any help. She would be hindering him instead. "Sorry for making a mess in the rooms," Lucas said as he glanced at the splattered blood and flesh on the wall. Hazel held her hands to her mouth, trying very hard not to gag. She spoke through her hands with a muffled voice and said, "Don't worry. We will clean up the mess. It's part of our duty." Lucas nodded and said, "They were sent by Lee Hee-song from the Hong Men gang. Do you know where I can find him?" He wanted to nip the problem in the bud. Lucas was not going to let Lee Hee-song continue to send killers after him. It was time for him to be the hunter instead. "Lee Hee-song usually stays in his mansion at the top of the slums," Hazel replied. She didn't know what Lucas was going to do, and Lucas wasn't going to let her find out. "Thanks. We shall take care of him soon," he said and walked towards the staircase and went up to his room. Hazel went to the check-in counter and got to work. She instructed the other staff to start cleaning up the mess in the room. The staff got the shock of their lives when they saw what had happened to the old man and the 4 other men. Some couldn't take it and puked on the spot. Even though they had been living in the East Battle Administration area for their entire lives and had encountered death and murders, it was still a bit too much for them to take. And to think all the carnage was caused by one person. They finally had an idea of how powerful Lucas was beneath his young high school-looking exterior. Lucas went into his bedroom, closed the door and activated his Ether Realm ability immediately. He ventured out of his room through the wall and landed on the ground floor. The ability at Adept level with a 30-second effective timing allowed him to get far from the hotel unseen by anyone. Lucas got to the entrance of the slums after 10 minutes with his gravity ability, flying through the air. Along the way it was uneventful without any encounters. Several men were standing on guard as usual. Lucas wasn't about to cause a ruckus and alert Lee Hee-song that he was coming, so he activated his Ether Realm ability and got through the sentries. He proceeded to leap through the streets of the slums. The mansion of Lee Hee-song stood prominent on the hilltop, impossible for anyone to miss. Under the darkness, he moved swiftly, and all that anyone could hear was a soft thud. Many would have mistaken it for the sound of a cat jumping at the rats. The slum was infested all over with rats, and it was a normal occurrence. As he got nearer to the top of the slum, Lucas noticed that the houses began to be more sparsely built. The mud road was now gone and a road paved with asphalt took its place. And when he got close to the mansion, Lucas shook his head when he saw that there were even greeneries that were landscaped. A literal representation of what it means for wealth to be concentrated at the top. Lucas hid behind a bush nearby and observed what was happening inside the mansion. Men in armor and weapons patrolled the mansion, talking into their comms devices on and off. He might have had to get past these by brute force previously, but now, with his Ether Realm ability, it was no longer an issue for him. After he saw a team of men in armor walk past the vicinity, Lucas activated his Ether Realm ability. Inside the realm, he could see the vision turn into something like a thermal sight. The figures of the men in armor were now illuminated for him to see. He glanced at the mansion, and he could see the figures even through the walls. And in one of the rooms, his target was marked for him. Lee Hee-song's figure illuminated in a red color as compared to the other men. Lucas wasted no time and he got into the mansion. When he had only 5 seconds more before the effect of Ether Realm wore out, he got into an empty room. Footsteps walked past outside the room as he waited. Stay alert. The gang leader's mood isn't that great these few days. Is that why the gang leader rejected all the girls clamoring to comfort him? Shut up and do your job. The gang leader is just being cautious. Those girls might be from the other gangs. The guards bantered as they patrolled through the corridor. Lucas activated his Ether Realm ability again. He saw that Lee Hee-song was lying on a bed with a rifle by his side. With the Ether Realm ability, he got through the walls without any hindrance, and he headed straight for Li Hisong's room. Li Hisong was feeling uneasy. His right-hand man, Gold Teeth, was killed by some unknown person, and his assassins he sent out hadn't reported back yet. They were supposed to have completed their job and come back by now. All sorts of thoughts went through Li Hisong's mind. Should have sponsored Lin Fan and the orphans. He cursed himself for rejecting Lin Fan's request to do so. If Lin Fan were at his side right now, he would have felt much safer with Lin Fan's ability. The last he heard about Lin Fan was that he went on a dangerous mission for a huge reward. Damn it! Li Hisong cursed and stood up. As time passed without any word from the assassins, Li Hisong grew increasingly anxious. Plop. Li Hisong took out a bottle of whiskey and a cup. He opened the bottle of whiskey and started filling the cup. His hands froze when he heard a footstep behind him. Li Hisong pretended not to know. As the whiskey flowed into the cup, he got ready. Out of the sudden, Li Hisong turned and hurled the cup at Lucas. But the cup was caught by Lucas's shadow and not a sound was made. Li Hisong then dived for the rifle that was on the bed. Lucas had expected this, and he used his shadow to pull the rifle away from Li Hisong. When he saw the rifle getting further away from him, Li Hisong saw his hope of survival getting away from him. He glanced at Lucas and gritted his teeth. As the gang's leader, he was not going to give up without a fight. Li Hisong clenched his fists and a green glow engulfed him. At the next moment, he threw his fists at Lucas. Green spiky vines came out from his fists and shot at Lucas. Lucas took a step to the side. The spiky vines brushed past Lucas by his side. Puff! The spikes of the vines puffed out green smoke and it got into the air. Lucas didn't know what the green smoke would do, so he activated his Ether Realm ability. Within his realm, he saw that the green smoke slowly settled onto the ground. It must have been something that affected someone if they breathed it in, Lucas thought. Li Hisong gasped when he saw Lucas disappear into thin air. It reminded him of Lin Fan. Was this man Lin Fan? Li Hisong looked around frantically. He glanced over at the rifle and the green spiky vines extending out from his hands started to move. The green spiky vines curled around the rifle and Li Hisong pulled back his arms. With the momentum of his arms being pulled back, the rifle flew into Li Hisong's hands. Tap. Li Hisong felt someone tapping on his back and he turned around immediately. He wanted to pull the trigger of the rifle, but he felt pain in his hands immediately. Lucas had grabbed onto Li Hisong's hands with his shadow. The green spiky vines moved and shot at Lucas. But when the green spiky vines got close to him, ice crystals started to appear in the air. Li Hisong saw white mist coming out from his mouth as he panted. The temperature also dropped drastically within a moment. Li Hisong's green spiky vines stopped moving as they were now frozen, covered in a thick layer of ice. Stop! No matter how much they are giving you, I'll offer twice that amount, as long as you spare my life. Li Hisong knew he had no chance against Lucas, so he started trying to offer Lucas a deal. If he could get Lucas to switch sides from the other gang, Li Hisong might be able to rule the slums with the power of Lucas. Lucas frowned, shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't get it. Why don't I kill you and get whatever money you have in your account instead? Weird for guys like you to think in that manner. Li Hisong was stumped by Lucas's reply. He knew Lucas was right and he couldn't think of anything to refute him. Lucas gave him a sigh and pulled back his arm. Boom! His fist broke the air, giving out a boom as he unleashed a jab at Li Hisong's head. The airwave shot at Li Hisong's head, and when it hit, Li Hisong's head splattered into pieces. The bed with its white bedsheet and blanket was now smudged with dark crimson and gray matter. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 600. Current slaughter points 3,700/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. He wasted no time, and he activated his Ether Realm ability. Under the cover of his Ether Realm ability, Lucas got out from Li Hisong's room and headed out of the mansion. Midway, he had to stop in one of the empty rooms when the duration for his Ether Realm ended. The guards that were patrolling didn't suspect anything. They continued to banter among each other while they walked in the corridor. After they got past, Lucas activated his ether realm ability. In the next moment, he started to run towards where he came from. The way down from the top was smooth. Lucas leaped and got past any obstacles with his ether realm ability when he had to. Soon, he got past the entrance with the sentries standing around and he headed in the direction of the hotel. When Lucas got back to his hotel room, it was 1:30. There was still plenty of time for him to rest. Lucas washed up the blood stains on his dark matter vault armor and he got to bed. The next morning, when he woke up, Lucas washed up and went downstairs for breakfast as per normal. "Morning, Lucas. Hope you've rested well. It might be a long day today." Riley and the others greeted Lucas when they saw him, unaware of what had happened in the night. Lucas nodded his head and joined them at the table. "Enjoy your meal." Hazel came in with a cup of coffee for Lucas and served him his breakfast. She gave him a nod and walked away. Hazel had realized the gulf between her and Lucas was too far apart over the night. "Thanks." Lucas, unaware of her transformation, thanked her and had a sip of his coffee. Riley began to brief them on the mission again as they ate. "Remember, try and see if there was anything unusual. Stick to your allocated areas to comb through. Lin Fan might have placed messages or symbols for the Shadow Lotus in the Gold Hill Cemetery. Also be on the lookout for any suspicious personnel. If you see them, do not engage alone." Everyone nodded. They knew how powerful Ashen, Risa, and Leroy were, and they were not going to be dumb enough to take them on alone. When they finished their meal, Riley stood up and said, "Get ready and we move out immediately." Harrianto was in the driver's seat as usual with Riley by his side. The others took their seats at the back of the van. It was a long journey to the Gold Hill Cemetery. Along the way, there wasn't anything else but the road and sparse vegetation. "Are we there yet? I'm falling asleep soon," Rex asked with his half-closed eyes. He was struggling to keep himself awake. The monotonous puttering of the van's engine was making him fall asleep. Smack! Emma slapped him hard on his back. "What the hell?" Rex protested and raised his fist. "That woke you up, didn't it?" Emma shrugged and the others laughed. "It did, but you could have used gentler ways." Rex wasn't too happy with Emma using brute force. Screech! Before Emma could counter, the van screeched to a halt. "We've arrived." Harrianto glanced back from the driver's seat and said. Harrianto parked the van hidden within some bushes. It was to prevent the Shadow Lotus from noticing if the Shadow Lotus came. After Lucas and the others got out of the van, they walked to the entrance and glanced at the cemetery in front of them. There was a rusty iron gate, with most of its paint peeled off due to time and the weather. What was behind the iron gate were rows upon rows of tombstones made of rock, all of them cut in the same size. And on the tombstones were pictures and the names of those buried underneath their allocated space. Most of the tombstones were covered in dirt, a sign that no one had visited for a very long time. The wind blew and some of the dirt and fallen leaves flew into the air. The leaves quickly dropped back onto the ground after a few moments in flight. "Damn, I'm feeling chilling vibes even with the sun out," Rex said as he glanced around the surroundings. Emma caught a glimpse of his expression and teased him. "You are afraid, aren't you?" "What? Me afraid? Never!" Rex protested with his fist raised at Emma. Riley shook his head and said, "All right, we better get into position and search for anything that's unusual. Most likely it would be a tombstone with the family name Lin on it." Emma and Rex stopped their bantering and nodded with the others. Lucas also nodded his head and headed towards the center of the cemetery. Riley and the others went to their allocated areas. The cemetery was about 3 miles from one end to the other. So, if the Shadow Lotus appeared, he and the others would have to move fast before things got out of hand. Lucas glanced at the surroundings when he reached the center of the cemetery. Luckily, with his enhanced vision from his physique level, he could roughly make out what his teammates were doing a distance of 1 mile plus away from him. Riley was in front of him, with Emma and Margaret to the right of him. And to the left were Harrianto and Rex at his back. Having ensured that his vision to the others was unhindered, Lucas spoke into his earbuds. "I'm in position." The other teammates also did the same and reported on their status. Lucas started to search through the tombstones for Lin Fan's parents. Lee, Atul, Ramdan. He went through the names carved on the tombstones, but out of the hundreds of tombstones, none had the family name Lin. Lucas decided to change his focus and try to look for anything that was unusual. If Lin Fan came every month, he might have brought offerings every time he came here, and he might have cleaned up the tombstone each time he visited. Lucas thought silently to himself. He spoke into the earbuds and told his teammates what he had figured out. "On it now," his teammates replied. They started to look out for a tombstone that had offerings and looked to be better maintained than the others. Lucas continued to search within his allocated area. However, after 10 minutes, it turned out negative for him. There weren't any tombstones with either offerings or that looked cleaner with less dust. The wind blew, but with a gust of hot air now that the sun had risen into the sky. Lucas's back was now sticky due to the stuffy hot and humid air. Risa was in the driver's seat with Ashen beside him. At the back, Leroy had his shirt unbuttoned and he was fanning himself with his hand. "Can't we wreak havoc like we always do, and then harvest the first awakened or the apex demonic beast?" He was feeling frustrated with lying low and having no chance of having fun. "You think the leader is dumb like you? You think he would wait for us to wreak havoc every time?" Ashen shook his head and replied. One of these days, Ashen swore that he would end Leroy if Leroy kept it up. His patience with Leroy was running out. They were traveling towards the cemetery in an armored car that was fully armed. A gift from one of the gang leaders. Ashen would have activated these gangs and security officials on their payroll to create havoc if it weren't for their failure in the West Battle Administration area. Risa slowed down as the armored car got closer to the iron gate. Leroy gave out a sigh and said, "Finally here we are. Get it over and done with quickly." "It'll be faster if you stop talking," Ashen said, and they got out of the armored car. Risa held his hands to the side of the armored car and a white glow appeared from his hands. The white glow darted into the armored car. Steel plates, circuitry, and electronic chips tore off from the armored car and they flew onto the body of Risa. They changed their form and transformed into something else after they enveloped Risa's body. Risa's hands now had 2 plasma cannons each. His body was protected with steel armor. "TSK. Always so flashy as usual." Leroy rolled his eyes and shook his head. "Keep quiet and follow me." Ashen stared at Leroy and said. He was getting to him more than usual. The next moment, Ashen walked towards the iron gate. Leroy shrugged and followed Ashen with Risa beside him. He wanted to whistle a tune but was stopped by Ashen's hand. Leroy smirked as he knew what it meant. In front of them was Riley, with his lightning armor engulfing his body. Flashes of lightning appeared in Riley's hands as he prepared his lightning strike. "We meet again. It's time to settle old scores," Leroy said and licked his lips at Riley. He saw Riley raise his hands at him and he got ready. Wham! Riley unleashed his lightning strike at Leroy. The lightning strike missed with Leroy bending his body to the side in the form of a C. Leroy pulled back his arms, preparing to whip them at Riley. Whip! His arms stretched and his fist smashed through the numerous tombstones that were in his way. Boom! Leroy's fist hit the location where Riley was standing, causing an explosion. The tombstone was smashed into pieces with the broken pieces shooting out in all directions. But Riley was nowhere to be found. Riley had no intention of engaging them in the first place. He had used the blinding flashes from his lightning strike to draw attention to the others. His intention was to get to the center of the cemetery to meet up with Lucas for his help all along. As he ran as fast as he could, Riley glanced back and saw Leroy coming after him. Ashen and Risa stood where they were. Thud! Suddenly, something had grabbed his ankle and Riley fell to the ground. It was Leroy's stretched hands. Riley pointed his hands at Leroy's and flickers of lightning appeared. But before he could unleash his lightning strikes at Leroy's hands, Leroy pulled his stretched arms back. Plop! Riley fell backward onto his back, and all he could see were the clouds in the sky moving past him quickly. Luckily, he had his lightning armor on, protecting him when his body smashed through the tombstones that were in the way. Finally, when he stopped, Riley saw Leroy's head pop into his vision with a smirk. "Think you can run away?" Leroy said, and his stretched arms coiled back. Leroy's feet then came smashing down onto his face. Riley quickly rolled to the side and Leroy's foot stomped into the ground, cracking through the concrete ground. Whoosh! A poison net came out of nowhere at Leroy from the side. Leroy took a few steps back and dodged the poison net. "Great! More toys for me to play with," Leroy smirked and said. He swung his arms at Emma next. Emma leaped away to the side and the stretched arms of Leroy missed by an inch. She quickly took a deep breath and blew out a cloud of red poison smoke at the arms. Sizzle. The poison smoke started to do its work, and it started to burn through Leroy's skin. Leroy quickly pulled back his arms away from the poison smoke. Wham! A lightning strike came from behind and hit Leroy's back. The lightning strike burnt his skin and opened a small wound. "How dare you!" Leroy shouted in anger and turned back at Riley. Riley ignored him and lunged at him with his lightning armor. But he missed as Leroy turned into a puddle of flesh and slithered away on the ground. Riley tried to go after him, but Leroy slithered away among the tombstones, making it difficult for Riley. The puddle of flesh made its way towards Emma. "Emma, watch out!" As Leroy got further away from him, Riley thought that he might not make it in time to help Emma. But a rock wall suddenly rose from the ground and blocked Leroy's way. Thud! Leroy hit the rock wall, giving out a loud thud. It was, however, not enough to stop Leroy. The puddle of flesh continued moving and it tried to dart at Emma. Whip! A spiky rock whip lashed at the puddle of flesh and tore through it. That also wasn't enough to stop Leroy. Rex immediately pulled Emma behind him, and he conjured a rock wall in front of him and Emma. Crack! The two puddles of flesh hit the rock wall and caused the rock wall to crack. The puddles of flesh then merged together, and they darted at the rock wall again. Boom! This time back together as one, they were powerful enough to get through the rock wall. However, Rex and Emma were already gone, and the puddle of flesh could only hit some of the tombstones, smashing them into pieces. "Leroy, come back here," Ashen shouted at Leroy. It was best if Leroy disengaged and the three of them stuck together. But it was next to impossible to pull back Leroy in the heat of the moment. Ashen gave up and observed the surroundings from behind, with Risa holding his arms up, ready to shoot out his plasma pulse at any moment. A shadow came over them and became bigger and bigger. Risa looked up and saw a grenade dropping onto them from the air. It was launched by Haryanto's drone. Bam! Risa shot a plasma pulse at the grenade. When the plasma pulse hit the grenade exploded. Shrapnel from the grenade rained down onto Risa and Ashen. A slit appeared on top of them and it opened. The shrapnel went into the darkness and void of the opening and disappeared. Next, the dark opening closed, and the slit also went away. It was not over as Haryanto's drone circled back, swooped down and launched a small rocket diagonally at Risa and Ashen. Ashen raised his hands and another dark opening appeared. Whoosh! The rocket went silent after it got into the dark opening. Meanwhile, when Haryanto was harassing Ashen and Risa, Leroy separated into 4 puddles of flesh, and they slithered into the rows of tombstones. "Be careful," Riley said as he joined Emma and Rex. The three of them stood with their backs to each other. They focused on the tombstones that surrounded them, trying to catch a glimpse of Leroy. Rustle. A rustling sound could be heard where Emma was standing. Rex and Riley turned and got ready, but nothing came out among the tombstones. "Watch out behind," Riley shouted immediately. They turned around and saw 2 puddles of flesh coming at them. Riley unleashed his lightning strike at one of the puddles of flesh and Rex whipped at the other with his spiky rock whip. Splat! The puddles of flesh got hit and they splat onto the ground. Without any hesitation, the puddles of flesh slithered back into the tombstones. There was silence for a short moment. They could then hear Haryanto's drone swooping down and shooting a rocket at Ashen and Risa. And after that, the silence resumed when the rocket was consumed by Ashen's dark opening. Rustle. A rustling sound could be heard in Emma's direction again. Riley and Rex hesitated for a moment. Riley and Rex weren't sure whether Leroy was trying the same trick again. Their moment of hesitation proved to be disastrous for them. A puddle of flesh darted out from where the rustling sound came from. It shot out at Rex's right arm, strangled and fractured his arm. Arg! Rex gave out a roar. The pain and fracture of his arm caused him to drop his spiky rock whip. Riley pointed his hands at the puddle of flesh which was now entangled with the mangled arm of Rex. He tried to aim at the puddle of flesh but realized he couldn't do it without harming Rex. His lightning strike might blow off Rex's arm. "Do it!" Rex shouted. "Let me!" Emma shouted, and she drew in a deep breath. A red cloud of smoke blew out from her mouth towards the puddle of flesh at the next moment. Arg! Rex gritted his teeth as the poison started to burn through his skin. The poison also burnt the puddle of flesh, giving out a sizzling sound and charred smell. Whoosh! The puddle of flesh darted at Emma next. Being in close distance to Rex, Emma couldn't dodge in time. The puddle of flesh wrapped around her waist and tried to slither up her body. Emma quickly blew a cloud of red poison smoke at her body. The puddle of flesh stopped when the cloud of poison smoke enveloped Emma's body. Leroy turned towards Riley and stopped. Riley's body engulfed in his lightning armor would cause him some pain. The puddle of flesh tried to attack Rex again. "Separate ourselves," Riley shouted. He realized that with them standing so close together, it had allowed Leroy to make the most out of his current form. Emma and Rex quickly leaped away from where they were. The puddle of flesh shot at where Rex was standing and missed. Boom! When it hit the ground, the concrete cracked and gave out a loud boom. Thud! Rex was hit by two puddles of flesh that had darted out from among the tombstones from the side. He was hurled away and tumbled along the ground, smashing through the tombstones along the way. The puddles of flesh merged, and Leroy proceeded to lunge at Rex. "Rex!" Riley and Emma shouted, trying to warn Rex. Riley unleashed a lightning strike at the puddle of flesh, and Emma hurled a poison net in the direction of the puddle of flesh. Boom! The puddle of flesh changed direction to its side, and Riley's lightning strike missed. It was still in the range of Emma's poison net. The puddle of flesh then leaped into the air, getting past the poison net. Their distraction bought time for Rex to stand up and conjure another spiky rock whip. Using his left hand, Rex lashed the whip at the puddle of flesh in the air. Whip! The whip hit the puddle of flesh, and it tore the puddle of flesh into halves. Emma lunged at one of the halves and blew out a cloud of red poison smoke at the puddle of flesh. The other half was taken care of by Riley. Riley smashed at the puddle of flesh with his arm that was engulfed in his lightning armor. Arg! Leroy gave out a cry in pain. One part of him was being burnt and dissolved by Emma's poison, and the other was being charred and electrocuted by Riley's lightning strike. The tide was turning around. Risa saw what was happening, and he pointed his hand at where Leroy was. Mechanical snakes shot out from openings in his armor. The mechanical snakes flew towards the back of Emma and Riley. By the time they felt the gust of wind coming at them from behind, it was too late for Emma and Riley. Thud! The mechanical snakes hit, and with their sharp fangs, these mechanical snakes bit into the skin of Emma's back with their sharp fangs. Riley's lightning armor electrocuted the mechanical snakes from biting onto his back. Buzz! Lasers shot out from their mouths, and the lasers sliced Emma's back open. The mechanical snake then tilted its head back, ready to plunge its body into the wound that the mechanical snake had created with its laser. Riley quickly swung his arms at the mechanical snake. The lightning armor engulfing his arm proved to be useful against the mechanical snake. Sudden surge of energy from Riley's lightning armor short-circuited the mechanical snake, and it fell off Emma's back. Drip! Blood flowed down from Emma's wound on her back. Risa's intervention was enough for Leroy to consolidate back into a puddle of flesh. He then aimed for Rex's left arm and lunged at him. Rex slashed his spiky rock whip at the puddle of flesh coming at him. Whip! The spiky rock whip cracked and came close to the puddle of flesh. But when it nearly touched it, the puddle of flesh separated into halves again. The two halves shot at Rex's neck and his chest respectively. Suddenly, a man appeared in front of Rex. It was Lucas. He had used his ether realm ability and waited for the right moment to strike. From their past encounters, Lucas knew that it would be difficult to kill them off without the element of surprise. An ice wall rose and blocked the puddles of flesh. Thud! The puddles of flesh slammed into the ice wall, slid down onto the ground and merged back together. Leroy turned back into human form, and he pulled back his arm, getting ready to punch at the wall. However, Lucas used his ether realm ability again and he got through the ice wall and appeared in a distance at the back of Leroy. In an instant, Leroy felt his innards being pulled to the ground. He struggled to remain standing. Lucas had used his gravity ability on Leroy and Leroy was now having 6 times gravity as usual. Flickers of lightning appeared in the air above. Leroy felt the hair on his skin stand. Rex quickly leaped away from where he was as he knew what's about to come. When Rex got far enough, Lucas waved his hands down. Pillars of lightning descended from above Leroy. Lucas didn't stop and ice pillars rose from the ground at the same time. The pillars of lightning had formed into a cage, and it was closing in with its radius getting smaller. From the ground, the ice pillars brought about sub-zero temperature, and Leroy could feel his body slowly being frozen. The lightning prison and ice palace gave Leroy no openings to escape. Leroy desperately tried to turn into his other form, but he had used up much of his energy earlier. He cursed and knew that he would be done for this time if he couldn't escape. "Ashen, get me out of here," Leroy shouted. Ashen hesitated for a moment. He could open portals to absorb the lightning strikes and ice pillars, but it wouldn't be enough. The only option to get Leroy out of his fix was for Ashen to engulf himself in his dark glow and go in to rescue Leroy this time. Ashen glanced over at Lucas, who was also looking at him. Without any other options, Ashen gave out a roar and his body was engulfed in a dark glow. He lunged at Leroy, trying to take out the pillars of lightning and ice with his dark glow. Plop! Ashen fell onto the ground in the middle of his flight towards Leroy. He also struggled to be on his feet. Lucas had used his gravity ability on Ashen, making Ashen have 6 times the normal gravity. Arg! Leroy screamed in pain as the lightning prison closed in. An ice pillar had also penetrated through his thigh, lifting him up to the pillars of lightning. Ashen knew the situation was dire. A slit appeared in front of him, and it opened. He painstakingly took a step towards the opening with the dark void inside of it. His heart sank when he saw an amber glow appear in front of him. Ashen quickly raised his right hand and prepared for what's coming. White glow appeared with a burst of lightning strikes. When Sheba appeared, it opened its mouth and swallowed the burst of lightning that came at it. "Help! I!" Leroy's consciousness was slowly going away as the lightning prison was ravaging through his body. His skin and flesh gave out smoke from their now charred appearance. Leroy would be gone soon with another strike from Lucas. Risa saw what was happening and he knew he had to do something. He glanced at Riley and the others. Margaret had healed Emma and was healing Rex's wounds. Rex's arm cracked as the bones grew back with the healing white glow from Margaret. Risa raised his hands and pointed his plasma cannons at Margaret. Out of nowhere, Harriento's drone swooped down and came at his face before he could pull the trigger. Risa had to engage his plasma cannons at Harriento's drone instead. Bam! The plasma pulse hit the drone and the drone was immediately blown into pieces. Thud! Harriento came from behind and knocked Risa to the ground. It was then Harriento's turn to fire off his plasma cannons. He aimed his plasma cannon at Risa's head. Bam! Debris flew into the air. And when the smoke and dirt settled, Harriento saw that Risa's head had dislodged from its body. In the next moment, mechanical snakes shot out from Risa's body at Harriento. Harriento did the same, shooting out mechanical snakes at those coming at him. As the mechanical snakes entangled and used their cutting apparatus and lasers to dissect each other, Risa's head, which was flying in the air, opened his mouth. Tiny robotic flies flew out from his mouth at Haryanto. The robotic flies gave out buzzing flashes of electricity as they flew towards him. Wham! Riley came to the rescue and unleashed his lightning strike at the robotic flies. Most of the robotic flies dropped to the ground. The remaining flies were taken out by Haryanto with his plasma cannons. The flying head of Risa knew that it might be over for them. He glanced over at Ashen, who was unleashing his burst of lightning strikes at Sheba. Leroy was now unconscious, with his body slowly disintegrating. It might have been over for Leroy now. Risa's body lying on the ground separated into parts, and the parts flew towards his flying head. It was time for them to bail out, Risa thought. His body reassembled together, and he tried to get to where Ashen was. Ashen's ability was the only lifeline to get away from Riley and the others, especially Lucas. Lucas waved his hands down and unleashed another lightning prison at Leroy, this time to ensure that Leroy would be dead. He also unleashed another ice palace at him. Lucas wouldn't stop until he heard the system's notification. After he was done, he saw Risa trying to get next to Ashen. He quickly used his gravity ability on Risa. Plop! Risa fell onto the ground. And with his body kneeling to the ground, Risa's body bowed down. Boom! To everyone's surprise, Risa's head was shot out from his body. It flew a short distance, but it was enough to get next to Ashen. Forget about Leroy. We have to go, Risa's head shouted. Ashen knew Risa was right. He gritted his teeth and unleashed a last burst of lightning strikes at Sheba. Amidst the blinding white flashes, Ashen picked up the head of Risa. A slit appeared behind Ashen. Wham! Lucas unleashed his lightning strikes at Ashen, trying to stop him. But another slit appeared and opened, absorbing the lightning strikes into the void inside the dark opening. Ashen then took the opportunity to step into the dark opening behind him with Risa's head in his hand. The dark opening closed and they were gone. Stay here, Lucas shouted, and he activated his Ether Realm ability. He went into his Ether Realm, and within it, he saw a dark smudge where Ashen was standing. The dark smudge disappeared. Lucas then glanced carefully around at the surroundings. He saw the dark smudge appearing not too far away, around 300 feet away. Lucas activated his gravity ability, took off into the air, trying to chase after it. Lucas didn't even get near the dark smudge before he saw the dark smudge disappear again. He had only traveled around 20 feet before the dark smudge did so. When the dark smudge appeared in his vision once more, it was now at least 600 feet away. Suddenly, the surroundings in his vision, which were like thermal sight, turned back to normal. The timing of 30 seconds for his Ether Realm was up. Lucas tried to activate his Ether Realm immediately, but this time when he entered his Ether Realm, he could no longer see where the dark smudge had gone. Ashen had gotten farther and slipped away once again. Lucas frowned, as it meant that he needed to level up and upgrade his abilities for him to have a higher probability of success the next time he encountered Ashen. With this thought, he turned around and made his way back to meet up with his teammates. A familiar sound then erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 1,600. Current slaughter points 5,300/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. At least he got Leroy this time, Lucas thought when he saw the system's information panel. Lucas, are you all right? Emma asked when she saw Lucas approaching them. Lucas shook his head and said, I'm fine, but they got away again. Riley sighed and said, if only Sherry were here with her cognitive dominion ability. What Riley said struck Lucas, and he had an idea on how to deal with Ashen next time. This was the benefit of having reliable teammates. Riley and the other teammates were standing around a pile of ashes. Rex couldn't help himself but spit onto it. So many innocent lives had perished due to someone like Leroy, and it was most satisfying to see Leroy now reduced to something as insignificant as a pile of ashes. Thanks to you, this scum has met his deserved end. How I wish his painful last moments could be forever. He walked over to Lucas and gave him a pat on his back. Rex recalled how Leroy had been squirming in pain while Leroy was being turned to ashes by the lightning prison and ice palace. I, for once, have to agree with you. Emma chimed in and the others also nodded their heads. Only once, Rex said. Emma shook her head and confirmed it for Rex. Yes, only once. I think we should make a move back to the hotel, Lucas interjected and said. There was still work to be done. Riley nodded to his suggestion, and Riley gave the order to get back to the van. They got into the van that was still there where Harrianto parked it. Birum. The familiar puttering of the engine could be heard as Harrianto stepped on the acceleration pedal. Hazel was looking out of the hotel's windows in the direction of the slums with a frown. There were sounds of gunfire and screams of men in pain coming from the slums. After Lee Hee-song was taken care of by Lucas, the other gangs had taken the opportunity to try and swallow the territories of the Hong Men gang. It was a never-ending cycle of violence for those in the slums. Her expression turned into a smile when she heard the puttering sound of the van approaching. She sighed with relief when she saw Lucas and the others coming back to the hotel safely. Welcome back. Hazel greeted them when Lucas and the others entered the hotel. Riley nodded at her and said, We need your help. Maybe we should talk about it somewhere private. After hearing what Riley had said, Hazel knew it was important. Come with me, she replied and led Lucas and the others to a meeting room at the back of the hotel. After the doors of the meeting room were closed, Riley began to brief Hazel on what had happened. She nodded as she took down everything Riley said. Killed a Shadow Lotus member? Hazel was astonished when she heard about what Lucas had done. The Shadow Lotus had committed many acts of terror, and they weren't punished for any of it. The security forces weren't able to deal with them. But this time, Lucas finally showed them that there were consequences to their actions. Yes, the man with the ability that allowed him to be like rubber was killed. Riley replied and Hazel's pen scribbled faster as she felt happy about the outcome. Now, I need you to inform Sherry for her to ask the governor to activate the security forces to search and find where Ashen is. And what's her next instruction for us, now that we've lost track of the Shadow Lotus? Riley said. Lucas interjected. Ask Sherry whether she can create a form of her cognitive dominion grenade that could control someone's mind for a moment. If not, maybe send me a sample of her blood. I would need it to be able to wield her ability temporarily. I will get it done, Hazel replied. It was a long shot, but it was the best they could do. Ashen might have left the city by now with his ability. Have a good rest. I'll get them to prepare a sumptuous dinner for you, Hazel said as she got to work, contacting Sherry. Lucas and the others nodded and left the meeting room. Hazel waited patiently for Sherry to pick up the call. The phone rang, but no one picked up on the other end. After a few moments, the phone call ended. Hazel tried again. This time, after a few rings, the phone was picked up. Secretary Sherry? Hazel asked. She waited for a reply, and all that she could hear was the sound of wind rustling loudly in her phone. A moment later, Sherry's voice could be heard intermittently. Give me moment. Bang. The noise of a door slamming came through Hazel's phone next. After the bang, the rustling of the wind stopped, and she could hear Sherry's voice clearly. Sherry was now in a small hut built on a mountain. She was in the North Battle Administration area, on her way to the hibernation facility of Derek. When she heard Hazel's briefing on what Lucas and the others had done, she felt a sense of relief. Finally, there was some progress in their fight against the Shadow Lotus. I will inform the governor, and I can try with the cognitive dominion grenade. Heck, I'll send him a sample of my blood. In the meantime, ask them to get ready to. Lucas had a good rest in his room. When he woke up, it was already evening. He came down to the ground floor for dinner. And as Hazel had promised them, the dinner was a feast compared to what they had before. There was a whole roasted chicken, a lobster, seafood, and steaks. Rex, who was already there with Riley and the others, rubbed his hands at the spread in front of him. His arms that had been healed by Margaret were now as good as new. What are you waiting for? Let's dig in, Rex said after Lucas sat in one of the seats. But before he could start, a familiar voice could be heard. Ho ho, having dinner? That looks great. It was Kevin with his teammates at the entrance of the dining room. Beside him was Terry and Terry's teammates. Terry frowned at the small dining room with everyone seated so close together. He instinctively took out his handkerchief and covered his mouth with it. Heh. Of course it's a great dinner, Rex said proudly. You guys are late to the party, he said and grabbed onto the drumstick of the roasted chicken and tore it out from the roasted chicken. Late? What do you mean? Kevin glanced over at Riley and asked. We've managed to get into an encounter with the Shadow Lotus, killing one of them, or to put it more precisely, Lucas did, Riley replied. Kevin shrugged and said, We knew that. We are here for the new mission. New mission? It was Riley's turn to ask. Kevin glanced over at Lucas and said, Our next target is to kill the apex demonic beast that has been terrorizing the East Battle Administration area. My team and I will try our best to ensure the mission is successful. He knew that the success of the mission depended on Lucas and no one else. It was best for him to try and get friendly with Lucas. Terry wasn't too pleased with Kevin taking the first move, and he chimed in with his muffled voice behind his handkerchief. I have gotten precious information about the apex demonic beast. I suggest we go through it in a more spacious area, Terry said. He was trying to showcase his value by virtue of him being in the Central Battle Administration area. Kevin frowned and crossed his arms. It was true that he didn't have as many contacts and resources compared to Terry. Before he could say anything else, Hazel came to the dining room and said to Kevin and Terry, Welcome. The staff will help you to your rooms. Other staff of the hotel came, helped them with their luggage and led them to their rooms. Hazel then turned and faced towards Lucas and the others. She proceeded to brief them on the new mission. Sherry has requested for you to eliminate the apex demonic beast around the area. The details have been sent to you, Hazel said and glanced over at Lucas. She also said that she will try her best to come up with the cognitive dominion grenade you requested. A sample of her blood is definitely on the way. Lucas nodded his head at the good news. With the cognitive dominion grenade or Sherry's blood, he would have a better chance of stopping Ashen. They picked up their phones and looked at the message that Sherry had sent them. It briefed them on the 5 million reward mission and there was a map attached. The map showed the areas outside the walls of the East Battle Administration area, marked with green, amber, and red on the whereabouts of the low, mid, and high-tiered demonic beasts, respectively. However, there wasn't any marking on where the apex demonic beast was located. Lucas frowned as he scrolled through the map. The apex demonic beast has been elusive, appearing in random areas. But one thing that's confirmed is that whenever it appeared, it brought about death and destruction to us, Hazel said with a heavy heart. So many of her friends and family had been taken away from her by the demonic beasts. And what was worse was what came after it. The gangs from the slums would take the opportunity of the carnage caused to exert more pain and suffering over the poor and helpless. I guess we need to hear what Terry has to say about the apex demonic beast, Lucas said, as it might be the deciding factor of the mission. She could have at least let us enjoy this meal first, Rex grumbled and stuffed the chicken drumstick into his mouth. It was one mission after another. He started to long for a break back home. Nighttime. After the dinner, the three teams gathered in the meeting room. Terry stood in front and Lynn helped him with the slides projected to the screen. On the slides were reports over the years of the attacks on the East Battle Administration area. The data and graphs showed no clear patterns to it. It attacked from different locations with different durations in between. Sometimes it attacked within a short span of a month. And sometimes it attacked once a year. Even the sightings about it were different. Some witnesses said that it was a demonic beast that looked like fog. Others said that it looked like a huge lizard. Lucas saw the slides and pondered, trying to figure out how to find the apex demonic beast. These are all that was known about the apex demonic beast, Terry said, and he gestured to Lynn to get to the next slide. The next slide was a picture of a huge lizard-like demonic beast with half of its body in fog. Lucas sat up and looked closely. It transformed from fog? Kevin asked. Or the other way around, the apex demonic beast was a huge lizard turning into fog, Lucas said. Terry nodded his head at Lucas and said, You are right. So, we have got to be looking for an area that is foggy, Kevin pondered out loud. Terry gestured to Lynn again. When the next slide came up, it was the same map that Sherry had sent everyone. But on it, there were few areas colored in gray, within those that were marked red. These are the few areas that were reported to be frequently filled with fog, Terry said. Lucas frowned even more. Lucas looked at the map and pondered. If there were more than one area filled with fog, they would have to go through all of it to locate the apex demonic beast. And that is if their guess of the apex demonic beast turning into fog form from its huge lizard-like form was correct. Whatever it was, they would have to go and search through the area separately or do it together. He wasn't sure of the best option until a thought came into his mind. There are around 5 areas marked in gray. I suggest we work together. My team and Riley's team should lead and sweep through the gray areas from east to west. Kevin's team can stay behind to give us support when required. Terry glanced over at Lucas and said, "What? My team and I should be the ones leading the mission with Riley's team." Kevin protested, unhappy with Terry's suggestion. He wasn't too dumb to know what Terry was thinking about. Besides, are you sure you wouldn't mind working with others and getting yourself covered in blood and mud? Kevin said, and Terry wasn't too pleased. Well, I was the one who went through the documents, sifted through the records, and got the extra bit of information. I believe my team and I deserve a little something for it. Terry wiped his hands with his handkerchief and said, "For that little bit of information?" Kevin tried to downplay the value of Terry's information. He stood up and Lynn also stood up immediately, drawing out her sword that was placed beside her. That made Kevin's teammates stand up and support him, which in turn triggered the rest of Terry's teammates to do the same. Rex leaned back in his chair and enjoyed the show. It felt great to be prized like how they were used to back in the South Battle Administration area. Even though he knew it was due to Lucas, he was still part of it. Riley shook his head and let out a sigh. It seemed like this mission was starting out great, he thought to himself sarcastically. He glanced over at the person who was in the middle of it all but had kept quiet. Lucas shrugged when he saw Riley glancing his way. He stood up and said, "Calm down everyone. There will be no sweeping through the areas." Terry's and Kevin's teams looked his way. "What do you mean? Is your team pulling out?" Terry and Kevin asked in unison. If Lucas and his teammates pulled out of the mission, they would reconsider taking it on. Lucas shook his head and said, "I will be able to find out where the apex demonic beast's location is. We can go straight for the kill." "Really? But how?" Terry and Kevin weren't sure how Lucas was able to do so, but they trusted him. They had seen his array of abilities, and it wasn't out of the question for Lucas to have such an ability to track and locate the apex demonic beast. Lucas had recalled the use of his Ether Realm ability. It could mark where his enemies were no matter what abilities they were using to hide away. That was how he got Lee Hee-song so easily, marking him in red with the Ether Realm ability. Then that's settled. Riley stood up and said, "We shall attack the apex demonic beast together after Lucas points out where it is. My team will approach it head-on, while Terry's and Kevin's teams shall approach from the sides." Terry and Kevin nodded at Riley's suggestion. And with that settled, it was time for preparations. Hazel brought them to the Awaken Center to stock up on the necessary items and essentials. Lucas got all that he could and stored them in his dark matter vault armor. Grenade launchers, automatic rifles, bullets, grenades, and even RPGs. Lastly, he also prepared water, dried food, and energy bars just in case it would be a prolonged battle. Riley and the others bought all the demonic beast cores that they could with the reward money they had gotten. They knew that it was best if they could get to master level of mastery as soon as possible. After they went back to the hotel, the only thing left to do was wait. Hazel had to communicate with the soldiers and arrange for the pickup to get out of the city. Riley, Emma, Harrianto, Margaret, and Rex stayed in their room, using the demonic beast cores to increase their energy level. In a dark room, Ashen sat on the sofa waiting while Risa was in front of a computer. Risa's hand had the familiar white glow. The white glow darted into the computer and Risa was trying to get information about what was happening in the East Battle Administration area. A moment later, the white glow dissipated, and Risa turned to Ashen. The security forces are out there looking for us. We can still make it out as it's a half-hearted effort. The head of security forces is more concerned with the gang fight disrupting his monthly corruption money from the gangs. Ashen nodded and asked, "The Awakened sent by the leader, what are they planning?" Risa sat down on the sofa and replied, "They seem to be planning to go out of the city, since they are arranging for transport to the airbase and a plane." That made Ashen ponder for a moment. It was clear to him what Lucas and the others were planning, which was to go after the apex demonic beast in the East Battle Administration area. He could take this opportunity and get back to the Dark Lord, or, even though Leroy was annoying, he was still one of them. Ashen made a decision, glanced over at Risa and said, "Get ready and join me if you want to. We can follow them closely and sneak attack them when the time is right. They are certainly not expecting us." Risa thought about it. The Dark Lord had fewer options now. If they didn't try to harvest the apex demonic beast in the East Battle Administration area, there might not be any left. Their chances of success with the First Awakened or apex demonic beast in the North Battle Administration area weren't high now that Leroy was dead. They would have to do it with a surprise attack after the apex demonic beast had been weakened by Lucas and the others. Risa finally nodded and said, "I'm with you." The next day, Lucas woke up to a pleasant surprise. A delivery was made to the hotel, and inside the delivery box were 5 cognitive dominion grenades and a test tube with a volume of blood inside it. Lucas activated his Crimson Pact ability. A surge of knowledge on how to use the cognitive dominion ability came into his mind. He was glad that it worked, and the next time he met Ashen it would be time to kill him off. Lucas kept the cognitive dominion grenades and the test tube with Sherry's blood in his dark matter vault armor. When Lucas got down to the ground floor, everyone was ready. They were dressed in their armor with their weapons. Armored trucks had been parked outside waiting for them. "Well, best of luck, everyone," Hazel said as she led them to the entrance of the hotel. The Awakened teams boarded the armored trucks, and Hazel took a last few glimpses of Lucas as he boarded the armored truck. Birum. The engines of the armored trucks started. One by one, the armored trucks left the hotel and headed for the airbase. Lucas, sitting at the back of the armored truck, looked out and saw the slums moving further away from him. Soon, the scenery changed and there were only rice fields that seemed never-ending. The monotonous ride made some of them close their eyes and have a rest. Riley, Rex, Emma, Harrianto and Margaret had stayed up most of the night trying to increase their mastery level. Lucas watched over them, feeling appreciative of them trying to become stronger. After all, they didn't have a system like he did. They reached the airbase after an hour of travel. The Awakened teams alighted from the armored trucks and got onto the airplane that was ready for them. Lucas got into a seat and waited as the back of the plane closed. He felt himself being kicked in the chest, pushing him back as the plane accelerated and took off. The blue glow engulfed the plane shortly after it was in the air. Lucas then took off the seatbelt and moved to the front of the plane with Riley. Terry and Kevin saw what he did and they quickly followed behind. Seeing out of the cockpit window, Lucas saw the ground, which was mountainous and filled with lush forests. "Where should we go?" The pilot turned around and asked. The airplane was headed to the areas marked gray where it was usually foggy. When Lucas saw the 5 areas that were covered in a white mist of fog, he activated his Ether Realm ability. Terry and Kevin were shocked by him. This was something new for them as they hadn't seen Lucas use this ability before when they battled with the Apex Demonic Beast in the North Battle Administration area. By now, they were starting to think that Lucas was one of the First Awakened. Within his realm, Lucas knew that his guess was right when he saw an area that was marked in red in the middle of the 5 areas. He appeared again in everyone's sight when he deactivated his Ether Realm ability. Lucas waited for a few moments for the pilot to calm down from his shock at witnessing him disappearing and appearing again. When the pilot was calm, he pointed at the middle foggy area and said, "Bring us near the area." The pilot nodded his head and turned the airplane towards the middle area. The airplane hovered over a clearing and the back of the airplane opened. "Let's go get some demonic beasts." Kevin pumped his fists together and his teammates stood up. Terry, not to be outdone, also stood up and waved his hand, gesturing to his teammates to move out. The last of them, Riley, waited for them to jump out from the back of the airplane. When it was clear, he stood up and shrugged his shoulders. What's the hurry? They would have to wait for Lucas, Riley thought silently. Lucas and his teammates jumped out from the airplane and landed on the clearing of grass. Immediately Lucas could feel the temperature being cooler, but the humidity was worse. He could already feel his dark matter vault armor sticking to his skin. The others were feeling the same, and they were wiping off the sweat from their faces. Lucas saw that there was a lush area of the forest they had to get through before they could reach the fog area where the apex demonic beast was. After seeing that everyone had landed safely, he waved his hand and said, "Come, let's go." He didn't want to be exposed in the open clearing for any second longer. Lucas walked towards the forest with Riley and the others. Terry's and Kevin's teams, as planned, moved on the left and right sides of them respectively. Initially, they moved quickly. Nothing out of the ordinary happened. But soon, the foliage got thicker with bigger trees and plants growing on the ground. Lynn had to use her claymore sword to hack through some of the vines that obstructed the way. On Lucas's side, Emma used her poison to good use. Her red cloud of poison smoke dissolved whatever plants that got in the way. Over at Kevin's side, Astrid was also able to use her ability to make the plants get out of their way. She stopped when they reached an area that had huge colorful mushrooms. These mushrooms were as tall as an adult's waist. Their bright colors of red, yellow, green, and some were colorful with spots all over them. Astrid tried to use her ability to make them shrink and go away but couldn't. She frowned and took a step forward, trying to have a better look. Puff! The mushrooms suddenly puffed out clouds of spores into the air. Astrid covered her mouth and quickly leaped back. "Cover your mouths. Do not breathe in the spores," Astrid shouted into her earbuds. Everyone heard what she said, and they tried to cover their nose and mouth. As the clouds of spores began to reach Lucas's side, he used his ice ability and an ice wall rose from the ground, blocking the spores from reaching them. "Watch out!" Lucas heard Astrid's cry from his earbud. Astrid unleashed her ability at an ice wolf that was coming at Kevin. Kevin didn't react in time. She quickly unleashed her ability, and vines grew out from the ground, coiling themselves around the ice wolf. The vines tightened and tried to strangle the ice wolf. The ice wolf gave out a whimper that made her increase the intensity, and more vines started to grow from the ground and coiled onto the ice wolf. "Stop!" Astrid heard Kevin's voice shouting from behind her. She glanced back and was surprised to see another Kevin standing behind her. She quickly turned around to the other Kevin to confirm. To her horror, her vines were trying to strangle Bjorn. Luckily for Bjorn, his ability with his spiky rock body armor helped him withstand Astrid's vines. I don't know. I saw you right there and there was an ice wolf." Astrid deactivated her ability, and the vines uncoiled themselves from Bjorn's body. It must have been the spores. Astrid was the only one who had breathed in some of the spores, and it might have caused her to hallucinate, tremble. Just as Astrid was speaking, the ground that was covered with mushrooms trembled. Slowly, the ground rose higher. It stopped when the ground was twice as tall as Kevin and the others. Kevin looked at the elevated ground and realized that they were demonic beasts. Soil flowed back down to the ground, and these tall, standing demonic beasts revealed themselves. They were demonic beasts that looked like snapping turtles. Puff! The mushrooms on the demonic snapping turtles' backs gave out another cloud of spores. "Get away from the cloud of spores!" Kevin shouted. He and his teammates leaped back, away from the cloud of spores. Roar! The demonic snapping turtles gave out a roar. Winds started blowing vigorously in the surroundings. Small tornadoes twice as tall as an adult formed, and they sucked in the cloud of spores from the air. Whoosh! The tornadoes moved and trailed Kevin and his team. Kevin and his team tried to move back further, but there were also small tornadoes forming behind them. Crack! The tree trunks that were hit by the tornadoes were torn into pieces, and the trees fell onto the ground. Kevin stomped his feet and the ground surrounding them became like the surface of the sea. A tsunami of waves that were made of soil and mud radiated outwards at the small tornadoes. Thud! The first of the waves collided with the small tornadoes, making the small tornadoes become weaker. A subsequent tide of the waves came and collided with the small tornadoes. This time it was enough to make the small tornadoes die down. When the last of the waves approached the demonic snapping turtles, wind blades appeared and shot at the waves. Thud! Little by little, the waves made of soil were sliced back into their original form by the wind blades. Everyone all right? Kevin wanted to ask his teammates, but he realized that his teammates looked different. They were all looking like man-like demonic beasts. Their faces had hands growing out from the sides, and these hands were covering the eyes, noses, and mouths of his teammates. Kevin shook his head, trying to get the effect of the spores out of his mind. However, it didn't help. He glanced in the direction of the demonic snapping turtles. There were only patches of bright colors where the demonic snapping turtles stood. "Are you guys able to see the turtles?" Kevin asked. "No," his teammates replied to him. They were all suffering from the effects of the hallucinations. Bladder. Wind blades shot out at Kevin and his teammates. One of the wind blades sliced through Astrid's thigh. The blood from Astrid's thigh splattered onto the ground, flowing furiously and non-stop onto the ground. Kane quickly conjured a rock wall in front of them. Thud. Loud thuds could be heard as the wind blades sliced chunks of the rocks from the wall. After a few moments, the torrent of wind blades sliced through the rock wall. Another wind blade sliced a chunk off the spiky rock armor of Bjorn that was covering his neck. Blood oozed out from Bjorn's neck. Kevin knew they couldn't defeat the demonic snapping turtles under the effect of the hallucination spores. Any attacks they made might be on their own teammates. He had no choice but to seek help. Requesting help. These demonic beasts let out these clouds of hallucination spores. "Be careful," Kevin said into his earbuds, hoping that assistance could reach them soon. Lucas glanced at Riley and said, "I should be able to deal with these demonic beasts." Riley nodded as he was confident in Lucas's ability. Lucas activated his Ether Realm ability and disappeared from Riley's sight the next moment. He got to where Kevin and his teammates were within moments with his gravity ability. Out of nowhere, Lucas appeared in front of one of the demonic snapping turtles. Boom! With his fist, Lucas gave a left hook, creating a booming sound as it broke through the air. His left hook didn't miss, and it hit the demonic snapping turtle's head. And a huge chunk of the head was blown off. The demonic snapping turtle thrashed around and the mushroom on its back gave out another cloud of hallucination spores. Lucas activated his gravity ability. Plop! The demonic snapping turtle dropped to the ground and so did the cloud of hallucination spores. They were affected by the gravity in the surroundings, which was now 6 times as much as the normal gravity. Bladder. Lucas with his leg stomped on the partial head of the demonic snapping turtle. The force that he came down with smashed the partial head into pieces. The body of the demonic snapping turtle twitched and it lay motionless afterwards. A familiar sound erupted in Lucas's mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 800. Current slaughter points 6,100/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. Lucas held his hands up and flickers of lightning appeared in the air above the remaining 3 demonic snapping turtles. When he waved his hands down, pillars of lightning descended upon the demonic snapping turtles. Bladder. The pillars of lightning descended onto the demonic snapping turtles, tearing through the mushrooms on their backs and ripping through their shells. The demonic snapping turtles tried to move away from the pillars of lightning. But the pillars of lightning had now formed into a cage, caging the demonic snapping turtles within. The cage started to slowly become smaller as its radius decreased. There was nowhere for the demonic snapping turtles to run. One by one their bodies were ravaged by the lightning cage. The putrid smell of their charred flesh could be smelled in the air, making Astrid close to vomiting. Lucas stood as he glanced at the aftermath of the lightning prison. A familiar sound erupted in his mind. Ding! Slaughter points plus 2,400. Current slaughter points 8,500/80,000. Host level 8. Current abilities 8. He was close to another upgrade for one of his abilities. Lucas glanced over at Kevin and his teammates. When he saw Astrid and Bjorn injured, he quickly spoke into his earbuds. Demonic beasts cleared. 2 of them are injured. We will need Margaret's help. Margaret heard Lucas and replied, "On my way now." It didn't take long for Margaret to arrive, and she immediately tended to Astrid and Bjorn. White glow coming out from her hands darted into the wounds of Astrid and Bjorn, doing its work. Astrid and Bjorn thought it was surreal to see Margaret in a demonic beast form. If they didn't know that they were under the influence of the spores, they would have been trying to kill Margaret by now. After Margaret was done, their wounds healed, and the effects of the spores also wore off. Margaret then proceeded to help Kevin, Kane, and Eric with the effects of the hallucination spores. "Ho ho! Thanks so much." Kevin patted Lucas's shoulder, and he also gave a nod to Margaret. If it wasn't for Lucas, they might not have made it through the demonic snapping turtles. The forest before getting to the apex demonic monster might be more deadly than they had thought. "Everyone be on high alert," Lucas spoke into his earbuds. After that, he glanced over to Margaret and said, "Margaret, come. Let's get back to Riley and the rest." Margaret nodded, and they headed back to where Riley and the others were. Kevin sighed as he watched Lucas getting further away. It would be safer for him and his teammates if Lucas were around. Lucas got back together with Riley and the others, and they proceeded to move forward. There wasn't anything unusual for the remaining journey, and after half an hour of travel in the thick vegetation, they had to stop for a break. The heat and humidity were getting to the others. Even though they were awakened and had relatively much better endurance than a normal person, it was still too much for them to endure. "We stop for a 10-minute break." Riley spoke into his earbuds and the others agreed. They took cover under a tree and started to take out water to hydrate themselves. Rex gave out a satisfying ah after he finished his bottle of water. And with his head up, he saw some fruits that were high up in the tree branches. "I wonder what those taste like? Better not eat strange-looking fruits," Haryanto replied. These fruits looked nothing like what they'd seen before. Some were purple, some were red, and some even had spikes. Emma nodded and agreed. "It's definitely not a good idea. I'm just saying, that's all." Rex glanced away from the strange-looking fruits and took out his energy bar. These energy bars didn't taste great, but they helped the awakened replenish their energy quickly, making them an essential item for the awakened when they went on a mission. As Rex munched on his energy bar, he saw figures climbing among the branches come up to the strange-looking fruits. "Look!" Rex pointed at the figures and said. Lucas looked up and watched the figures closely. With his enhanced vision, he could see that the figures were monkey-like creatures covered in dark fur, with 4 arms and a long tail. They grabbed onto the strange-looking fruits and twisted the fruits. After they twisted the fruits off the branches, they started to take a bite of the fruits. "See, they're edible," Rex said when he saw the monkey-like creatures eating the fruits. Lucas frowned at how the monkey-like creatures started to behave after they swallowed the fruits. The monkey-like creatures started swaying to the left and right, as if they were intoxicated. To his surprise, Lucas saw the monkey-like creatures starting to fall from the branches. Plop! One by one they landed on the ground, giving out a loud thud. It was a weird scene for even veterans like them. All of them quickly stood up. Emma took a deep breath and got ready. She approached the monkey-like creature nearest to her. "Rustle." Emma blew out a cloud of red poison smoke at the creature the moment she heard the rustling noise coming from the creature. The monkey-like creature sat up from the ground and it swung its 4 arms around while giving out a low guttural sound. More of these monkey-like creatures sat up and gave out the same sound. Soon, the forest was filled with the echo of these creatures. An orange glow engulfed the monkey-like creature and Emma's poison cloud couldn't do anything to it. Soon, the orange glow dissipated, and the body of the monkey-like creature was now bright orange in color. The monkey-like creature lunged at Emma with its 4 arms. Clang! Emma gave it a frontal kick, and when her kick landed, all she could hear was a metallic sound. Pain shot from her foot up to her knee. She felt like she had kicked a steel wall. Crack! 2 of the arms of the monkey-like creature grabbed onto Emma's hand and cracked Emma's bones. The remaining 2 arms raised above Emma's head and slammed down at her head. Whip! Rex cracked his spiky rock whip at the 2 arms, and it coiled itself around the arms. He quickly pulled his spiky rock whip with all his might. Another monkey-like creature, which was now blue in color after taking the fruit, lunged at Rex. A chill sensation came over Rex's body. He glanced to his side and saw the monkey-like creature's hands coming at his face.